expanding its travel ban to 36 more countries, Nigeria has issued a stark warning. The nation says the US could face retaliatory action and risk losing access to strategic minerals in...
The United States is preparing to ban 36 more countries from entering, including 25 African nations and Nigeria, the continent's largest powerhouse. But this time, Africa isn't staying silent. Nigeria has issued a chilling warning. Ban our people and we'll ban your minerals. But why would America risk losing access to the very resources that power its tech, energy, and defense industries? Let's find out. It wasn't the first time the US imposed travel restrictions. But something about this list was different, colder, broader, and far more symbolic. 36 nations were reportedly being considered for entry bans. 25 of them are African. And standing at the center of that list, like a red target, was Nigeria. This wasn't just about immigration anymore. It was a map of exclusion. The official reason? Security concerns. That's the phrase the US has leaned on before. Vague enough to sound credible, flexible enough to fit any agenda. But this time, even seasoned diplomats raised their eyebrows. No insurgent attacks, no urgent crisis, no meaningful spike in visa fraud, just a sweeping decision to lock out entire populations, engineers, scholars, tech workers, and students alike. The deeper truth? This wasn't about security, it was about control. And Nigeria knew it. As Africa's most influential nation, by population, GDP, and cultural reach, Nigeria's inclusion on the list didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like a signal to the continent. Your influence is growing too fast. Your independence is becoming inconvenient. And your shift toward multipolar alliances, BRICS, China, Russia, is starting to rattle the old world order. Behind closed doors, Washington's strategic planners have watched Nigeria with increasing discomfort. The country has been building refineries in partnership with China, signing bilateral currency agreements that bypass the US dollar, exploring tech alliances in Asia, and most recently, consolidating its control over rare earth minerals, the same ones American companies desperately need for batteries, semiconductors, and renewable tech. So when the US dropped news of a travel ban expansion, it wasn't just a bureaucratic move, it was a geopolitical chess play, a move to pressure, isolate, and weaken rising African autonomy. But the calculation was off, because while Washington expected quiet compliance, perhaps a statement, perhaps a shrug, what it got instead was a threat. Nigeria didn't ask for talks, it didn't beg for an exemption. It responded like a nation that understood its worth, a nation holding cards the world can't afford to ignore. The ban may have been written in ink, but the retaliation? It would be delivered in metal, the kind buried under African soil and embedded in every phone, drone, car, and missile on Earth. And that's where the game changed. Because this wasn't just a diplomatic standoff. It was a collision between old assumptions and new power. A reminder that Africa, and Nigeria in particular, is not just a recipient of global decisions, but a maker of them. And the travel ban? It had just awakened a sleeping trade weapon. So the question now isn't just why did the US do it? It's this. What happens when the world's richest supply of minerals decides it's tired of being taken for granted? Nigeria could have issued a strongly worded letter and moved on. That's what global powers usually expect from countries in the global south. Polite disappointment, followed by silent acceptance. But this time, Nigeria answered policy with power. Shortly after reports of the expanded US travel ban broke, Nigeria's Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuggar didn't call for talks. He issued a warning. Not a threat dressed in diplomatic vagueness, but a direct message. If America shuts out Nigerians, Nigeria can shut off the minerals America desperately needs. And suddenly, the discussion shifted, from passports to processing plants, from embassies to electric vehicles. Because Nigeria isn't just a large country, it's a gateway to the mineral wealth of West Africa. It sits on top of untapped reserves of lithium, cobalt, niobium, and tantalum, metals so critical to modern life that a single embargo could send global markets spinning. The same minerals that power electric cars, smartphones, solar panels, military drones, and artificial intelligence servers. The US, the Department of Energy, has quietly labeled many of Nigeria's key exports as strategic and irreplaceable. So when Nigeria hinted at limiting American access to these resources, the impact wasn't symbolic. It was economic warfare, executed through the very arteries of the global tech ecosystem. And this is where Nigeria's genius lies. It didn't retaliate emotionally. It retaliated logically. After all, what does it mean for a country to say, "Your people can't enter," while still expecting to extract the raw materials from their land? Tugger flipped the logic. If you restrict human access, don't expect material access either. But this wasn't just about denying ore shipments or shutting down a mine. Nigeria, and by extension West Africa, knows its true strength lies not just in extraction, but in leverage through supply chains. It understands that the world has begun a once-in-a-century transition toward green energy and digital infrastructure. And the fuel for that transition isn't oil anymore. It's lithium, cobalt, and rare earths. Nigeria is watching the West scramble for alternatives to Chinese supply chains, watching Europe chase new energy sources, watching America pass law after law trying to secure critical materials. And it's realized that something crucial. The world can't move forward without Africa, and Africa doesn't have to move with the West. Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. By linking mineral access to immigration respect, Nigeria reframed the debate. It wasn't about security anymore. It became about reciprocity. A simple question hung in the air. If we're not good enough to enter your airports, why should our minerals power your economy? That question hit Washington harder than any protest ever could. And it didn't stop there. Nigeria hinted that it wouldn't act alone. In mining conferences, side events, and diplomatic whispers, conversations began about a new approach to resource nationalism, where African nations could begin coordinating access policies in unison. The message was subtle but clear. If one nation's minerals can become leveraged, imagine what happens when 15 nations act as one. Which leads to a deeper possibility. What if Nigeria's defiance inspires a regional front? Because minerals don't need visas. But if they're denied, the consequences travel far. And now, all eyes are on West Africa. The question isn't whether Nigeria can hold the line, it's whether the entire region might rise behind it. What began as a US-Nigeria standoff quickly evolved into something far more formidable. Because Nigeria didn't stand alone for long. Across West Africa, in quiet corridors of power and buzzing regional forums, the message resonated. If they can do this to Nigeria, they can do it to any of us. That's when ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, entered the arena. For years, the 15-member bloc has focused on economic integration, regional peacekeeping, and development. Rarely does it challenge global superpowers on matters of immigration policy. But this time was different. ECOWAS released a statement that didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like a position of collective strength. The bloc warned that the proposed US travel restrictions would not only damage relations with Nigeria, but also undermine the entire region's economic future. It condemned the move as a barrier to development, and a contradiction to the principles of mutual respect and cooperation. But this wasn't just a diplomatic note, it was the start of a regional realignment. Behind the scenes, ECOWAS officials began reviewing how visa bans could affect cross-border projects funded or supported by the US, power corridors, digital infrastructure, and mineral corridors stretching from Nigeria to Niger, from Ghana to Guinea. If the US could isolate one nation with a single policy decision, what safeguards were there for the rest? And then came the turning point. Multiple ECOWAS members, including Senegal, Burkina Faso, and Sierra Leone, began discussing the possibility of collective mineral negotiation frameworks, policies that would allow West African countries to coordinate their export conditions, set regional pricing, and, crucially, determine who gets access and who doesn't. In simpler terms, if you isolate one of us, we decide together what you lose. This was unprecedented. For decades, African nations have been picked off one by one in global trade, negotiated separately, pressured individually. But the travel ban made it clear. Unity wasn't just ideological, it was strategic. Regional solidarity could become economic defense. And it wasn't just about minerals. ECOWAS began looking at the bigger picture. What if U.S. universities suddenly saw a 40% drop in West African students? What if remittances slowed? What if U.S. firms trying to expand in Africa found themselves stuck in a bureaucratic maze? The most powerful element in all of this wasn't just what ECOWAS was saying, it was what others started whispering in response. Because in Beijing, Delhi, and even Ankara, diplomats noticed the opening. China's Belt and Road envoys began soft-courting the same countries on the U.S. list. India's foreign ministry floated visa cooperation pacts in African embassies. Turkey's foreign investors offered regional digital infrastructure plans that would bypass Western systems altogether. The message from the global South was growing louder. If the West turns its back, we won't stand alone. We'll stand together, and we won't stand still. ECOWAS leaders, often overshadowed in global affairs, suddenly found themselves in a powerful position. They weren't just reacting to America's policies. They were shaping Africa's terms of engagement on visas, minerals, and respect. And that's where this crisis becomes something much bigger than a list of banned passports. Because when a region decides to link identity with industry, people with power and sovereignty with resources, a new framework is born. And it's one the U.S. didn't see coming. So what happens when this regional unity begins affecting something bigger than diplomacy, like global supply chains and the fate of America's tech future? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch